It's going to do a little countdown. All right, I think we're good. God forbid something else fucks up on me. I swear.
Yeah.
Like every week, this gets a little bit more and more complicated. Taylor, thank you for jumping on with me. It's an absolute pleasure. I've had multiple people reach out to me to say that you needed to get on, and I'm an absolute fan of that idea.
Well,
100%.
that's really cool to hear. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we kind of get into things, we met how long ago was that? A couple months ago?
That was at the Arnold. That was the first weekend in March at your
Yep.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were an absolute mutant. I don't think people realize how large of a human being you are. It's
I'm
incredible.
always standing next to Ben, and he fucking owns that angle game.
No, man, it was amazing to have you out, and it was amazing to just see you guys just throwing some serious fucking weight around. You were training for a show at that point, weren't you?
Yeah. I was. This last show I did, Rainier Classic. That must have been like 12 weeks out. So it was just getting into things at that
Yep,
point.
absolutely. Yeah. So how did you end up doing there?
Yeah, I got my ass kicked. But it was the heaviest show I ever did, and I can't say, up until now, I've almost been kind of disappointed with some of the competitive aspects I've ran into with Strongman, because it seems like there's always some sort of contest, like fuckery that goes wrong as to why you didn't perform your best.
Right.
And I've always just been really frustrated because I've never gotten my ass thoroughly kicked where it was like everyone was better than me and I felt like, yeah, this is where I belong.
Mm-hmm.
Or I had some easy win where it was like I don't even really belong at this level of athletics, or I got hurt because of something was wrong with the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the first show that I thoroughly got my ass kicked, and all by heavyweights that I had to train hard for. So that was an optimal outcome for me. I liked that.
Well, that's funny. I mean, people forget that it's called Strongman and not Fast Man, right?
Yeah.
Like I've seen so many shows. Even the last show I did, they ended up fucking up the stones at the end. So it went from the stones being, can you complete them? Like for most people, they probably would have had a hard time completing it, to it just
Hmm.
being a fucking drag race, whereas the difference
Yeah.
was half a second between first and second and third.
Yeah, there's kind of a nice sweet spot with picking those events because you want to see a race, right? You want to see some of those top guys competing to finish, but you also want to see the majority of that middle of the pack kind of struggling, maybe not even finishing all the way.
Right, absolutely. So I want to break into strongman a little bit. How long have you been competing in strongman?
My first competition was Michigan's Strongest Man 2015.
Mm-hmm.
I took a 3 or 4 year break in between where I didn't do any competitions at all, but I've been involved since 2014 was the first athlete that I coached in a show.
Mm-hmm. And now you not only coach strongman athletes, you coach bodybuilders, powerlifters. You kind of touch in all sorts of strength sports. Is that right?
Yeah. You've studied conjugate pretty close, and you understand that all of those methods kind of came from how do we train athletes
Mm-hmm.
across all sports with the same system that's just modified depending on the requirements of the sport, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of been my approach to the strength sports.
So how long have you been coaching athletes for? The same amount of time or a little bit longer?
2000, yeah, 2014 is when I started. So it was mostly personal training, and honestly, that first athlete that I had was like, she was just a master's, older female client who kind of did it like she would want to do. She was just like, yeah, I want to go do a marathon this week. I want to do a CrossFit this week, and so she was like, I want to do strongman. I was like, what the hell is that? Is that what I used to watch on TV? And she was like, yeah, I got some stones from a friend. She brought them in, and I was like, I was actually 8 weeks out from a powerlifting meet. I was going to do single ply meet,
Mm-hmm.
and when they brought the stones in, um, I just abandoned my program and started lifting stones every day and logs, and just it was so much fun that I kind of almost like went off that like back to the newbie, just like fucking off and maxing out thing again
Mm-hmm.
because it was just so fun. Um, so yeah, that kind of deterred me from initially I got into all this because of multiply and single ply,
Mhm.
but yeah.
So how did that multiply and single ply go for you initially?
I really didn't. I only had one shirted session. I loved squatting and deadlifting in the suit. I got a lot out of them. Even the one session in the shirt I had went really well. I've always really liked it, and I've always had the intent of pursuing it at some point. But you know how these things go. It's kind of like a long term venture. So I do want to complete my project here before going into something else.
So you are currently your main goal is strongman, right? What is
Mm-hmm.
the next competition you're going to be into?
Um, Hopefully a Clash qualifier in January. That's the intent. I the main I have less competition goals and more just kind of partial goals of strongman. I'd really like to have an attempt at the 231 circus dumbbell record. Same with the stone load record. So there's some certain lifts of the sport that I really like, and competition is kind of more so for fun and for research. But
Mhm.
yeah, Clash ideally is what's going to happen next if I can make the cut.
Absolutely. What is that circus dumbbell record for the
I
231?
believe Clayton has it at 270 right
That's
now.
that's a fucking
It's
heavy.
nasty. Yeah,
That's a fucking dumbbell, man.
yeah.
And that's what it, and it's funny because you see, I don't think if people that aren't into strongman or are aware of the sport, they think just because they think the big guys, right? They think the Eddie Hall, the Brian Shaw. They think of the new age bigger humans, but the fucking 231 class is
Nasty.
unbelievable,
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable. Like pound
Not.
for pound, fucking way stronger, and they're
Mm-hmm.
pushing the same numbers that the big guys are.
Mm-hmm. Some of them, yeah. Some of
And
them, not. I mean, deadlifting and squatting is a bit hard, right?
right.
Log press is hard, but that dumbbell is, you look at the positioning requirements of it, and you start to say you can only be so big and maintain that thoracic extension and that lat positioning and all that, and the hips, and so it's I do think there's probably an optimal weight unless you're built like a freak like Martins or Novikov, where it's like that 250, 260 range is probably going to be your best pressers.
Yep.
But look at, did you watch Uncle Nick's
Yeah.
press?
Yeah.
Dude, 250 something at that class? That's what I'm saying. I think the small guys are going to win that one.
And I think what I thought you did that was really cool. I saw a video that you posted, kind of breaking down like the circus dumbbell technique, just
Mm-hmm.
even the angles and understanding what you're trying to do. Because I think so many people go into strongman and they do not respect the technique necessary to move those weights. Right? They
Mm-hmm.
think it's just a brute strength thing. But when you're talking about a circus dumbbell, you're talking about needing to be quick, needing to have that snap. Then you look at somebody like Nick Camby, who was getting under insane weights with that split jerk, with that speed and athleticism. And I know that he has a wrestling background. He
Mm-hmm.
was actually from, he went to school in the same state that I was from. So he was a wrestler. So it's like, again, it's that athletic background and understanding kind of how to move your body. But that's one of the cool things that I noticed about the stuff you put out in your coaching style is you're amazingly technical, right? You think about the minutia, you think about the little things, and all those little details add up to a really cool thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, I like when things move fast, and I like when things move pretty. And I also kind of realize, like, you look at Olympic lifters, you look at wrestlers. That's kind of where I came from, and the way we trained was just singles, doubles, and triples, just perfect over and over and over again. Very rarely are we going into the max effort, and we're always just bringing that bottom end up with better and better speed. And so uh, I mean, I tell Ben that all the time. He's like, he the squat is something that for me is one of my favorite lifts, but I always joke around. I'm like, my goal, I push my RPE 8 squat because I like seeing a really fast and pretty squat. I don't
Yeah.
like grindy squats, and so he doesn't understand. Like, well, why don't you push maximal squat? And I'm like, well, I like seeing it go fast, and it also just fucking hurts. So
I mean, that is different than someone like a Dan Green. Have you seen his
yeah,
sets? It's like,
I love watching those.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not for me.
Yeah, no, but it's funny because and this is what I kind of wanted to go into a little deeper with you is just your even philosophies of coaching and how you get your athletes ready. Because the things that I see you doing, I appreciate so much. And like you said, is just moving the weights well, building up
Mhm.
that technical skill over the course of time and just getting better and better and better week to week. And I think in strongman, people forget, like I mentioned before, the technical skill of it. It's
Yeah.
like you're drilling that shit with your athletes and yourself, right?
Yeah. And, one thing I always, because I struggle with this, and when I'm sitting down programming, we all struggle with it. They think, oh man, we got to add weight to the bar. We got to get this stronger. But strong is strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if one thing's getting stronger, the rest of the body's getting stronger as long as you're doing it right.
Right.
And that's kind of what's brought me together on some of that stuff, especially with strongman, where there's so many things that need to be strong. You really have to be picky on what you pick to get strong, and the rest of it is all just technical work. And
Mm-hmm.
go together,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And I think that's such a good takeaway to have is because, like, especially if you're new to strongman and you're like, your first step should be to not, like, eventually just not zero the events, right? Like, that should be the first goal.
In my opinion, strength needs to be the last priority in your prep. Strength and hypertrophy should be done when you enter that 8 to 12 weeks out. You're already strong enough to hit anything on any given day. It just might not be strong enough to hit it at your best all in the same day. So that prep is dedicated to the implements, the conditioning, the speed, the transitions between events, the nutrition, everything else, because you know we have so many energy systems to train. You got to think like, how can I, you know, kill the most birds with the least amount of stones per se.
Right. And just as an idea for any sort of content that you have on your end, I would love to see you even just pick an event, a random strongman show, and like, this is what I would do for a program for that. I think that would be a cool thing to see.
Actually, that's something I'm glad. It's funny you brought that up because Jody and I, my girlfriend, we're working on. We're over this next course of the year. We're going to come out with 10 to 12 programs, all on popular shows that people are
Uh,
doing. So it's just our take on how we would train, just a general
mhm.
person. Try to set it because I mean I'm sure you've seen like I like when someone can apply what I have to their own thing. So, maybe these programs aren't just traditional black and white programs that kind of have like, hey, maybe this is how this get this takeaway from it to apply to your own prep, or I don't know. I'm just trying to think of more accessible ways that we can get people ready for these shows.
Mm.
I don't know, I'm just talking on my ass.
No, you're good, man. But I think that's an awesome tool
Dude,
because
so your face is frozen in a
is it?
very concerned look. And so this last 5 minutes, like I'm just in trouble. You're just like,
The audio sounds good, man. Fucking audio sounds good. Um, yeah, man. I think that's important to do because there are, as you know, like, there are lifters out there that are strong, are brutally strong, but they don't have that direction. They don't have the knowledge of programming and whatnot. And to be able to provide them at least a solid base and a resource, that's fucking awesome. Because if you can positively impact their readiness for a show, then you have just up leveled the entire strongman community to,
yeah, that,
just to a much smarter level.
yeah, that's my, that's my theory is that if we get the lowest guys as knowledgeable and as strong as possible, that's only going to push the bigger guys stronger. That's only going to make the competitive guys a deeper class. And um, it's just going to make everything better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to be on the lookout for that shit because it's so interesting to see the different takes. Even if you can have two coaches programming for the same show and it's going to look
Mm-hmm.
completely different. But as a coach myself, to be able to see it's a way for people to look into your brain and to see,
Mm-hmm.
like, what principles you follow, what sort of a hierarchy of needs that you have, and as an athlete, it's even more important to see, because it's like, okay, what do I need to be ready for when the time comes, right? Because as an
Yeah.
athlete, I think a lot of the times you get so sucked up into the day-to-day and process that you don't see the big picture. So
Right.
I'm sure you've worked with athletes being like, why the fuck are we doing this? And then
Yes.
you stop, explain everything, right? But it's to see that big picture is super, super valuable. And that's awesome that you guys are doing that, because you're both strong as fuck.
She's way stronger. Yeah.
No, it's fucking great to see, man. Yeah, no, she is fucking strong as shit. Holy hell, man.
Yeah, she's pretty nasty. Those deadlifts are crazy.
It's unreal. And that's
Yeah.
the coolest shit. Like, I love seeing that. Like,
Yeah.
because it just seems like everybody's just, for the most part, as a collective, just getting stronger and stronger. And people are hitting numbers. You're like, okay, I got to step my own fucking game up here.
Oh yeah. Like that the Josh and Adam hitting that 500-pound stone at 231 this last year, you know, the dumbbell is getting absolutely insane just in every class, max and for reps. I remember 2018 was the last show that I did before this last one, and my dumbbell weight was 200 pounds. The heavyweights was 230, and everybody was like, "What the fuck are they thinking? That is way too heavy." And now it's like we've got, and that was at the heavyweight class. So now we've got 231, up to 220 pounds in their show. That you know that was the Arnold weight not
Yeah.
too long ago when I think Poundstone won that event, like 7 or 8 reps or something like that. But that was not too long ago.
Mm. And I was at the show, I think it was in North Carolina. I think Clayton set that dumbbell record there. Was that the one? I don't remember. It was in like
It was on
20.
a Bartos.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yep, that was the one.
And I remember being there as it was a 230. I was in the 231 class, and I was like, it was one of those shows where I was like, I'm gonna get my fucking ass kicked. I'm gonna love every second of it.
Oh yeah,
So I get there, and it's like Clayton, Matt Mills. I forgot who else was in the class. Furman was there. Furman was competing.
man, you got passed around then, huh?
Well, my God, I was like, this isn't fun for me. But it was just such a cool thing to see, because you need to see what the top guys are doing,
Yes,
and to be
yes,
like, oh, I thought I was a bad motherfucker. Turns
yes,
out, not a bad motherfucker at all.
yeah, and so, like I found that too. It's the humbling thing, and I've found the actual like, oh, I can tangibly see what the human limit is now, and I can go
Mhm.
further, because in my own head I was like, yeah, this is as far as you can go, and then you kind of see with I've always had this sensation after a show with how tired I am, how much I was loaded up on drugs in comparison to my age in the sport,
Mhm.
how fat I was and like immobile I felt, and then to what those guys could do. I kept going back to like, okay, this is about long-term development. There's just like way more to this, and you can just go so much further if you're willing to just take that time.
Yeah, and that's a good point that I want to touch on with you as well, is the whole drug conversation. It's almost like you need to have a certain base
Hmm.
of strength, a certain base of time in the sport to really get the most out of using any sort of substance, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's medicine, right? It's a pharmaceutical. That's what it was intended for, and then we start abusing it. We can call it a drug,
Hmm.
and I think, you know, I'm sure you've had those cycles where you just feel like you get to the end of it and you're just like, wow, I'm tired, and like it just like feels like a lot. Um, and then I've also had cycles like more recently where there's some of the smaller or more moderate ones, and I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm like earning every bit of this, every bit of it is being utilized, and I don't
Hmm.
want more than this. And it is because it's been when my training and my diet is periodized correctly with the proper compounds. And I've also put myself mentally in a spot where like I can take that on. I don't have other stuff going on. So I think like really for the drugs to work their best at the minimum, like for you to get the most bang for your buck, right? Like you really got to line everything up and understand like, okay, if I'm going to use them, that requires that I am training and eating at a more than human level,
Mm-hmm.
and I need that to like recover from that level of eating and training. And um, the only way that you can really commit to that level of training is ironing out everything in your life so that you have a good, period of 8 to 12 weeks to dedicate to that you don't have to fuck around, basically.
Mm. And when I was working with Andy Triana,
Mm-hmm.
I was always picking his brain, right? Like I just wanted to learn. He's like a fucking machine. I just wanted to know as much as I possibly could. And he was saying the environment in which you introduce any sort of drug is
Mm-hmm.
as important as the compound itself.
Absolutely.
And
I think he is, correct me if I'm wrong, but he is probably one of the only ones in the industry that also kind of plays around with this idea of periodizing the mind.
absolutely, 100%.
So
He,
that's the one thing I noticed from him.
yeah, it was amazing because he would have you start your day because it didn't matter who he was working with. He was always trying to get the uh, anything if they were taking even like insulin or whatever to have the environment that is leaning more towards cognitive growth
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to another stressor,
Right.
right? As for example, if you were to pin whatever in a stressed out state, it's not going to have the same sort of impact if you were in like, yes, this is good, this is what we want to do, right? And he just brings that whole level in, and
Mm-hmm.
like he himself was a fucking freak, but he has worked with some tremendously strong and powerful people, and
Yeah.
you got to
No.
think like all the little stuff matters.
One of my favorite uh, team combos to watch right now is Cotton and Triani, because it's like you've got this guy who's a fucking animal, just the absolute rage monster, and then you've got Triani who's just like the master of the brain, and it's going extremely well. So it's been a fun one to keep track of.
Yeah, it's cool. And it just it's one of those things where you're very much like me. You don't want to walk into a room and be like the guy, right? You want to
Mhm.
fucking learn every opportunity you can.
Yeah.
And working with him and just being surrounded by people like him. I mean, I would go to Lightning Fitness. I would hang out with Matt Mills and like that whole crew, and just to look around and be like, motherfucker, these guys are mutants. I'm
Yeah.
like, and it does. You're right. It like opens up a part of your brain that says you can do this now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's how I was, just a local fucking whatever, coaching, just like, I mean, just my guys in my hometown. Ben came along. I didn't really even have social media. I mean, I had an Instagram, but I didn't really know anything about it, and I just like didn't really pay too much attention. Ben came along, and looking at him, I'm like, this guy clearly knows some shit that I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And he trained at a gym that was an hour away from where I lived at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna show up every single day. I didn't even know him. I was just like, I'm gonna catch what time he trains, and I'm gonna train every single day when he trains, and I'm just gonna just watch and observe the difference. And it was crazy because what I started to notice is I was like, oh, he's no different than high level wrestlers. I need to stop thinking about this as like so different and like so cool. I just need to go back to what I had learned in college wrestling. Like he just lives it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really nothing special. And then just yeah, after getting to be friends and giving him a million handoffs and spots and talking and stuff, you kind of start to see like this isn't. If anything, it's even more simple at that level. And it's such a simplified thing, as opposed to this like I always talk about powerlifting and strongman used to be like WWE to me, where I just kind of saw it from a distance, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty fucking crazy. I'll just kind of stick here to my own business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, and you're right. I mean, Ben probably is one of the you just see him from a distance and you're just like, what the fuck is that? Like
Yeah.
he's a fucking he is an awesome specimen. Like in
Mm-hmm.
whatever he's doing, he's putting his 100% into that, right?
Yeah.
Lifting, he was a fucking freak, and
Mm-hmm.
now he's what? 240. Like he was powerlifting at 181 and now he's 240.
Dude,
Incredible.
stage weight was 245. He's looking at like 260.
Holy shit.
Motherfucker's a professional now.
Yeah, that's the real deal.
Yeah.
And so when did you guys meet?
COVID, like like so April 2020.
Get the fuck out. I thought it was
February,
way earlier than that.
March. No, I thought Kaylor Woolham was going to walk into my gym because someone said that Dr. Deadlift guy moved into town.
Oh shit. But yeah, man, the other thing I wanted to kind of touch base on with you is the whole. We start to see it a lot, and we had a little bit of a conversation about this prior to recording. Is the new wave of athlete, new wave of coaches, right? And almost like the passing of the torch from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. You see it a lot on social media. A bunch of fucking old heads saying this sucks, you'll never get any better. But then you have athletes like and coaches like Andy Triana who is literally doing things the complete opposite as what people have done in the past. What have you seen on your end in terms of like the old way of doing things versus the new wave?
I don't really think it's that different. I think if you actually looked at like Andy's system and how he's like training his athletes, just from what I've kind of noticed from Tyler, like as far as training goes, there's really nothing new that the Soviets haven't discovered. And right now it's more so about how to annually structure that with an athlete, because in strength sports we don't have this chronological year that every other sport has set up for itself.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of jumbledness with random periodization and random phases of fucking hypertrophy at this time, because that's just what we've been telling each other. So I think it's a combination. I think the old guys got to let go a little bit, and I think the new guys got to be open-minded enough to realize, like, look, dude, the only way you're going to be special and unique is by being able to apply what's already there better, because we're not reinventing. No one needs to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to make yourself special through your programming or like your movement selection or whatever it is. You just need to do it better because it's already been done.
And obviously results fucking trump everything else, right?
Everything. Yeah.
If you're not getting the job done, and if your athletes aren't getting better, it doesn't matter what you say, what you do. It's obviously not fucking working.
Yeah. And it doesn't. One thing, like, I've noticed, and this might not even be an ego thing. This just might be a pure misunderstanding or a just almost an integrity move of like, I feel like, he programmed this way, so I have to have this completely like new way. And it's like, no, like you can take a little piece of that and make it yours and apply it differently. And it's not stealing, it's not taking. It's like we have a finite number of way to do things when we're talking about putting on tissue and lifting a fucking barbell. So, it really comes down to the specific athlete and refining the application process. And, I think that's what I see a lot of in young coaches is, one, they think they have to be different, whether it's because of their ego or because of their just lack of understanding of how, to go about things. And then the old guys need to understand that they were those young guys and they were fucking off trying to find out what works and doing stupid shit. And that's why we have what they have. So there is a place for that experimentation and it needs to be done. And perhaps the older guys can help guide a little bit more receptively than just being like, oh, you're fucking dumb. And then vice versa.
And I like to use the example of like, okay, if you're a carpenter and there's another carpenter down the road, you're both going to use a fucking hammer. Like just because the other carpenter uses a hammer
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're like, no, we can do this way better.
I can do it with my skull, motherfucker. Back up.
Right? I'll use my pecker for this. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's that it really boils down to how well you can connect with your athletes, understand their goals, and best use the tools at your in your arsenal to help them. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's one of the things that I'm finding more. I mean, having spent the last year at Elite and getting in touch with a lot of really cool people,
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of guys that have been in the business for years and years and years and years, is like the newer wave of coaches have a tendency to, like you had said, kind of overcomplicate things
Mm-hmm.
because they see the older way of doing things as too simple or that doesn't work or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the best attributes of the younger coaches is their willingness and desire to absorb as much information as possible, almost to their detriment. How many times have you
Yes.
seen young coaches who are like taking all the latest certifications, learning as much as possible, talking about it, and then just like not fucking doing it?
Yep. I've done it. I've done it with my athletics. I've done it with my coaching, where it's just like, okay, buddy, you've learned enough. Quit questioning yourself. Go do it. So,
Yeah, that's tough, and it is because I was in the exact same boat. Honestly, right over
but
quarantine, like 2020, I was fucking just like trying to gain as much information as I could, and then when you're at the other end of it, you're like, I know all this new stuff, and they're just fucking looking at it. You're like, but I'm not helping anybody.
yes. And then, in the same note, when you've ran out of stuff to teach and it's time again, like there will be another time where it'll be kind of hard to peel away and go back into learning mode.
Mhm.
But I think that's where the best of the best are made, is who can keep going through that the longest, back and forth.
Yeah, and now you just did a seminar too, didn't you?
Yeah,
How'd that go?
it was fun. Yeah. Ben Pollock and he's a strongman, I think mostly multiply coach, but he's got a good group of strongmen. And actually kind of the point of the seminar was kind of about what you mentioned earlier, is that we both talked about how we annually plan and how we would get a strongman ready for a show on the same events. And we walked through our processes. And it was funny because, him being a conjugate max effort guy, he's coming at from everything from like, okay, if my guys can hit 120% of contest weight, then they'll be strong enough. And me coming from the other side, I'm like, well, if we can, make 100% our 80%, then we'll be good. And it's just funny that like we have completely different systems that are really operate on the same things.
Mm. Now, yeah, and I think that's going to be. I think there's going to be more of a resurgence with seminars for sure because
I hope so.
dude, that's the best way to learn. Like me personally, next time you have one, I'm gonna fucking go because I love the idea of connecting with people and just picking each other's brain.
Let's
And
do one together.
fuck yeah, man, absolutely.
Yeah,
Because
no, I feel so fucking limited by virtual coaching. Like I need to get in there because
it's such a big difference, right? And
mm-hmm,
it's something that people forget exists because
mm-hmm,
there is obviously you've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this for a while. The art of working with somebody in person versus remotely is night and day different. The amount
yeah,
of input you get from somebody in person, being able to just watch their body language, their temperament, how they moved, what's going on. You just get that full sort of experience that you lose virtually. I'm not saying you
yes,
can't coach somebody virtually, but I am saying that like in person learning, holy shit, that's night and day.
yeah, and just purely from an impression standpoint. I mean, you see how I come across online. Sometimes it's a little bit more abrasive than I'd like to, and that's just because I don't know how technology works.
but it's so good because it's still that's one of the things that the old school guys do well is they have no fucking filter
Yep,
at
that's why I get along with them well.
all. Yeah, right. Yeah, me too. It's like okay, they're just it's like grandpa's saying this shit again. Like
Yep.
oh no, he's talking about the war. But yeah, man, I think you're doing such a great job of just connecting knowledge that you have with the people that, you know, follow your stuff, and just anybody that wants to know how to get strong. And I think you also have that experience of throwing yourself in there and being like, all right, I'm going to get really fucking strong. Because you said something earlier that I think is totally understated in the whole field, is you did powerlifting as a means of research. And I
Yeah.
did the same thing when it came to multiply. I was like,
Yes.
I need to learn this thing by doing the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's so fucking awesome to see. And I mean, realistically, it's how I got into strongman. My buddies were just like, hey, there's this thing that we're doing. We lift these rocks and like fucking pull trucks with like a fucking harness on or whatever. And it was like, oh, the only way I can learn about this is by doing it.
Science. Let's do it.
But yeah, man, I give you credit for that, because that's the experiential learning is where you gain such a tremendous amount of knowledge.
Yeah, I can't read a fucking book to save my life, so that's my only option.
Well, it's great, man. Like it really is, because it gives you that insight. It gives you that the language to talk to somebody about it, right? I mean, I can't imagine how much knowledge you gain from just even training with Ben with the whole bodybuilding thing, like just as many people that you work with all over the all over the fucking gamut of strength sports, like it's because you've done them. It's because
Mhm.
you fucking train like that, and that's massively important for you, but also for the people listening. Is go out and just try the fucking thing. Like just sign up for a powerlifting meet and compete and see what happens, right? If you're a
Yeah,
coach, and I think that if coaches aren't competing in something, right? Like it doesn't have to be the top of the fucking heap, but it's like they have to have something that drives them, you
yeah.
know?
At the very least, it needs to be evident that they're doing research in some way, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're at least training really hard, trying to figure out whatever it is that you need
Yeah.
to give to your athletes.
And I think that walk the walk, talk the talk thing, I think is you can tell the people that are doing it, and you can tell the people that aren't doing it, right? I was when I was the first couple months I was at Elite, there was like a internal battle between a couple people on the team. They were bitching at each other online, and I was like, it was like me and Dave in the gym, and I look at my watch. I'm like, they're both coaches, and they're bitching at each other online at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. Like
Yeah,
something fucked up. Like you guys should be coaching right now. You shouldn't be bitching at each other on Facebook.
yeah. You guys finish your program updates early or something?
Yeah, man, and that's the thing that drives me nuts too. Is I understand that we're going to have differences in opinions, and people can post shit, and a lot of the times people are just looking for a certain amount of shock value in the things that they say, or like it's the old adage with like Louis. Like Louis would always be like, "This is the only way to train. This is whatever." But it's like that's his thing. Like, of course he's going to say that. Why would he not?
Yeah,
He's got fucking books and equipment to sell.
yeah,
But like in
yeah.
the real world, that extremist, like it has to be one way, is awful, especially
It doesn't
because
exist.
you
Yeah,
shit online, right?
yeah. No, it's and that is one thing that I see with some of the not as good coaches is the just push all the time, drugs, competing, food. There's no downtime on any of it, and you watch these athletes break mentally and physically, and it's just really sad because these are some of the most promising athletes that are gonna would have had the potential to break some of the biggest barriers. We don't get to see them do it.
Yeah. And how, for example, I mean, I obviously with all your athletes, it's going to be a little bit different, but overall, do you put caps on your athletes and say, hey, man, like you want to compete 3 times this year, but we should probably only do 2, or we should only do 1, or like whatever?
Yeah, yeah, we talk about that. I mean, it's really hard for me because you go off feedback, right? As a coach, especially in the virtual platform. So if I have someone, they get excited and they're like, let's do this one, I'm feeling really good. And then 2 or 3 weeks in, they're like, yeah, maybe I don't know if this is the right call. So I'm having to get a little bit better about seeing like, you know what, maybe right post contest isn't the best time for them to pick their next show out just because they're going to be so excited.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I have found that sometimes, but when it's more of like that, hey, like I want to do this, this, and this, like, okay, well, I'm going to tell you this is going to be probably our best route. I figure out like, okay, what's the underlying goal? Well, I want a pro card. Okay, well, you don't need these three shows that don't pertain to the pro card, you know. Uh,
Mhm.
so it is kind of hard because I want everyone to do what they want to do, and at the end of the day, it's their call. But I do try to at least tell them my opinion and they can do what they want with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that vein of sort of the coaching aspect of things, if somebody wanted to, because I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, can you talk more about strongman and like how to train for it and what to do? If someone is just off the street, wants to do a first strongman show, how would you say, what resources would you have for people to learn how to train or what to do for that specific event?
Well, that's a good question because it's a hard one for me to answer because part of me wants to say figure it out
Hmm.
because that's part of the nature of it. And when I did my first one, I had no feeling of like, oh my gosh, I need this thing to teach me how to do it. I looked at it and then I figured it out, whether it was by traveling to gyms, asking people, trial and error, whatever it was. So there's part of me that thinks it is important to just go figure it out. Um, but then on the same note, because it is just really hard, especially like depending on where you live, there might be just absolutely nothing. Um, are you asking from like purely a training standpoint or from like a resource?
All of the above.
I guess like resource standpoint would kind of be like a better starting strongman, like kind of what the intent of that was supposed to be.
Right.
Um, um, you know, it's such a like niche sport that it's the people doing it that are the best to put out the information are just too busy doing it and being fucking strongmen, you know. um, so it's a little hard just based on the nature of like who it attracts. Um, um, Training wise, it's overhead pressing and deadlifting, grip and carrying, and I would say picking shows that have things that you can at least halfway practice, and not doing anything that's just like, oh wow, that's just like so weird and different.
Hmm.
I have no way to fucking prepare for that. You know what I mean? So I'd at least very much make sure like I can at least prepare for it to some degree.
Yeah.
Um, it's a hard question. I wish I had a better answer. I think that's kind of also why you and I are here and doing all this is to provide that
Hmm. Well,
over the years, right?
yeah, for sure, absolutely, and that's one of the hardest things is I was talking to an athlete that I'm kind of working with here right in Ohio, and he wants to do his first show,
Mm-hmm.
and it will vary from person to person. You can tell when someone really wants to do it
Mm-hmm.
versus just kind of talking about it or they like the idea of it. This guy was committed. He's like, I want to throw myself to the wolves. And I was like, all right, look up whatever shows are in the area within driving distance and just commit. Just throw yourself in there. Just figure it the
Yeah,
fuck out, right?
yeah.
And he signed up, and he was like, "Oh, it's that beer muscles show out in Pennsylvania. So it's like all keg related things."
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have a fucking keg in sight. I'm like, "All right, well, we're gonna figure this one out together, man. Here we go." But
How,
it, so it's like a Ukrainian deadlift with kegs, which is whatever. It is what it is. Then it's like a keg overhead press, and then it's like a fucking I think it's a keg loading, and then just like
yeah,
keg thing. And I'm like, dude, you fucking picked the absolute winner of a show
the
for your first one.
it's like, oh, that looks fun. Oh wait, like maybe it's not that fun.
Yeah, but I told him, I go, listen, like you don't have to do that one. There's going to be more.
Mhm.
But I fucking love the attitude. If he's
Yeah,
willing to roll in, at like 250 body weight, do like heavyweight novice, and just figure this shit out, fuck yeah, man. Like
Yeah.
100%. That's the
Yeah.
best way to do that. But I also don't want him to put any sort of any part of his ego on how he's going to do on this show, because
Yeah.
it's going to be a clusterfuck.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Keg's a hard one to prepare for. I really don't like that event at all in any way, shape, or form.
No, not even close. Not even close. It's awful.
It's
But
like,
I
what did you guys look and see? Like, I'm trying to imagine how that event was invented, and I'm just like, would you guys fucking forget something and then look around and that was the next thing that was there?
they're like, we only have access to a brewery. What can
Oh
we
shit.
But yeah, it's been cool to kind of see that, and I think training for strongman, I mean, honestly, gets you just better. It just puts you in a better position to do other things, right? And I'm sure
It
you've seen that
does.
with powerlifting. I'm sure you've seen that with a lot of things. And it's funny. I was talking to Adam, right? You know Adam, obviously, and
Which one? Oh yeah, see,
yeah,
Levichik. Yep.
yep. He's he's obviously getting ready for Worlds now, but when he was in his like an off season, he was like, "All right, I'm gonna hook up this Zercher harness to the belt squat." I go, "Dude, why don't you just fucking pick something up in front of you?" He's like, "No, no, 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 I'm
No,
not,
no, 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 no.
I'm not gonna do that."
He's one of the last like true old school gems that's just gonna
Mhm.
fucking die with the old way of things, and I love it.
And I know that I time it every time he tries to get off a bench. I'm like, all right, this is like a 20-second ordeal.
He's the littlest guy I know, and he knows what it's like to be fat.
Yeah.
He's just lives it.
I'm like, why are you breathing so heavy? You weigh 159 pounds.
Yeah, he's a good one.
But it's cool to be in that environment, and I've kind of had conversations with a lot of the other guests on the importance of a good crew and just being surrounded by people that kind of help support you. What would you say is, I mean, you've worked with some really fucking strong people, right?
Mm.
And Jody's really strong. You work with Ben, he's a fucking freak. But what would you say is the draw to your training crew, or do you have a training crew right now?
Currently, right now, it's just Jody and I. I'm kind of in one of those transition phases where I'm not really. I'm regular with the gym, but I'm not even going to the same gym every time. It's kind of one of those fucking in between down phases.
Yep.
So I don't really have a set crew. I'm really looking forward to the crew that we're going to have in Texas because for event day, it's going to be me, Jody, Terry Rady, and I've got another guy down there who's coming up in the open division who should have his pro card in the next year or so. I don't know if you know Eric Carlson, but he's down that way. And then I'm actually Terry's been bugging me about getting back on the mat in jiu-jitsu, so uh, I'm looking to start grappling a little bit more, just at least for health purposes.
Hmm.
Um, but man, as far as crews, some of the coolest ones I've been in, Dirk's crew, Adam
Yeah.
Dirks and Kim Dirks, especially when they have Evan Singleton around,
Hmm.
and Trevor, I forget his last name, but you've got, you know, he's got another guy who's still an amateur pressing 430 logs, and Trevor's loading 500-pound stones, and Adam's loading 550s. Evan's doing literally whatever he feels like doing. Um, and then as far as bodybuilding, uh, MI40 was amazing. Adam Bremer is one of those old school coaches who's kind of unknown as much because he doesn't get on the social media, but he's the head coach at that gym, and it's like you'll have a good 2 or 3 different crews coming in throughout the day. I'm talking Nick Walker and Kamal are one of the crews, along with a board shorts pro, and then Adam himself. That's one of their crews. Those guys are fucking 3 of them are top 3 in their division every single year, and well, not Nick, but he will be.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and then so like that, like seeing shit like that, where like you've got really big names on social media, but when you're actually looking at their training and their coach, it's like you don't even see what's actually going on and how fucking badass this is and how unique this crew is. And then I spent some time out at Generation Strength with Chris Bridgeford, and that one will fucking blow your mind because you walk in and it's like you kind of look around and you're like, oh yeah, these are just some normal dudes just taking powerlifting as just a fun hobby, but you start looking closer and everyone's benching mid fours, pulling over 7, and squatting mid 6s up to 800 pounds, and that's just kind of all the females are squatting 4 and pulling 4, and that's just kind of the general standard in there, and no one really thinks anything of it. That's just like their lower lifters,
Hmm.
So it's really fucking cool to see some rooms like that, especially coming from West Michigan, where there's literally nothing
Yeah.
impressive going on.
But it's those types of crews, and just, I mean, you're very much similar to me in this regard as well. Is like you just acquire so much knowledge just being in the space, just like
Yeah,
watching. You're like, what the fuck is going
just
on here?
it's the rules of evolution and adaptation, right? A bigger pond, you're gonna get bigger.
Absolutely, and I think that it's a very cool thing for people to do. Is like they get so locked in. It's like I go to this gym at this time all the time. It's like
Mm-hmm.
just kind of spread your wings and fly here a little bit. Fucking take a drive to another gym. Take it up, go on the weekend, and just kind of see a new crew, a new space. You just learn
Can
so much.
you can you imagine how detrimental that would be to young bro's ego? That would be very painful, Sam. Can't have that.
It's gonna make a fucking t-shirt. It
Can
says
you imagine?
your young bro fucking ego is dying. To your
Kill
ego,
him.
right? Like you can tell people that have gotten their ass kicked.
Yeah,
You can definitely tell the people that have had hard shit happen to
that's
them.
why. That's why I talk shit. Is because you're never going to be able to kick my ass harder than it's been kicked.
Yeah, nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
That's right.
No, and it's funny because like strongman is it can be fucking painful. I don't know how many fucking Instagram posts of you there are bleeding. You tried to take your own fucking head off with a circus dump a couple months ago.
Trying to get a t-shirt design off that one too. Nobody
Because
cares that I locked out 250.
yeah, no shit. What
Like,
the
how's your
fuck?
head? It's fine. Did you see that I locked it out, basically?
Well, that's like the best way to go is hit a
Right.
PR, let it fucking crush your skull, and have something in the will that says your teammates have to come in and load the bar up with more
Oh
weight with
yeah.
EMT
Can
truck.
you imagine like the depletion plus the high? Dude, I was on a different fucking level when that happened. It was
You're,
amazing.
yeah, dude, you're on a different planet. You're just all sorts of fucked up. So one of the other things that I appreciate about you is that your openness to talk about drugs, to talk about like any sort of recovery. Like fucking, you smoke weed all the time, and it's awesome. And
Yeah.
how do you incorporate weed into your sort of lifestyle, into your training? Because I know people that do it all the time, and I know people that actually do it just like as a recovery aid.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Um I pretty I'm very like intense, and even in my thought process I find sometimes that I'm just very like um not necessarily like aggression, like anger, but just like a lot going on, and it
Mhm.
just really helps me to keep things a little bit slower.
You're
That
right.
makes sense.
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely. And it's funny. Adam was talking about, because you guys had met years ago, right? Like you guys
yeah,
had,
it's funny how we meet. We like meet randomly and have never had more than just a dab session together. We just like hang out and
but it was funny because Adam was talking to him about you and Ben, and he was saying that having you two in a room talking about training, it felt like he was on a fucking alien spaceship because it was like you guys were so locked in, and he was like, "What the fuck are they talking about?" Oh fuck, man.
yeah, we have actually come up with like so Ben and I have like literally invented terms and phrases to like describe training shit to one another because That's all it is. Like if you look at one of my programs, I'll send you one if you want. But you look at one of my programs, it'll have percentage, RPE, RIR, and description next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all of them will be filled out. Sometimes it'll just be one or two. Sometimes it'll just be one of them. But we've been really paying attention to like what resonates and how with the athlete, and all of those things are just trying to communicate a certain effort level. But someone might see RPE and say, oh, that means a max. And then someone might see 3 reps in reserve and say, oh, okay, but in my opinion, that's RPE 8, both however way you cut it.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends. It just matters how you get them to get it done, right?
Right. And that
So yeah, we've come up with like systems like that where it's like, because the only systems out there are like, you know, Olympic athletes and old school guys and stuff like that, where they have invented their terms, and a lot of times they're just complicated and way over people's heads. And so, you know, just like you would come up with a cue for an athlete.
And have you seen, and that's so similar to how Andy would program as well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any of his programs, how he describes some of the sets?
I have not, no.
So he has different verbiage as well. He says like robotic, and then he says like his heaviest fuck off sets are like he just vibe
Yeah.
out, just lose yourself.
Okay. I've seen some stuff like that. Yeah.
So
I like that.
yeah, I do too, because it's you're taking into account the perception of the client, of the language that they have, the ability to describe
Yep.
a situation and how they feel in that situation. So that shows such a in-depth level of give a fuck
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
your clients, right? Because you're not only trying to get them from point A to point B, you're doing it in their language, which
Yeah.
is so fucking cool.
Yeah. He had to sit there and think, how can I make this better and better and better for them? You know, that's really cool. Not many people do that.
And for your athletes and the people you work with, your strongman competitors, you have that language of understanding, saying like, all right, we're going to do this until you fucking want to vomit. But
Right.
even within that level, there are
Mm-hmm.
levels to that, right?
Right.
And it's like
Right.
what you're trying to get across and what their experience with that level of work may just be so different
Mm-hmm.
that it would take time, obviously, to be able to put yourself in a situation where you can use they know exactly what you mean with the things that you say and when you
Yeah.
say.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's that's the level that I think young coaches need to aspire to,
Mm-hmm.
is because at no point were you talking about just the X's and O's. You were talking about the actual feelings, reality of the person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
fucking once this is why I need to get high more, is because once you start thinking about this shit, you're like, oh, how do I communicate in their language? What's their language?
Yeah.
Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it like there are so many variables to training that once you start kind of thinking about it, then I'm not high enough for it. So
And that's why coaching can be such a place of like power and manipulation, and you have to be super careful with the way that you do these things and talk to an athlete, because there are psychological responses from progress, failure,
mm-hmm.
you know, training over time, fatigue, all that stuff, like, you know, causes slightly different fucking thought processes and emotions and all that. And you look to your coach, you know, for a lot of things that are like like can really affect your psyche and the way that you view yourself and the reason that you make decisions and stuff like that. So you know, being very intentional and making sure that like there's never any sort of like, oh, they could have taken that the wrong way, or they think the thing that is important for me is that they know that this is their choice and they can do whatever they want. They push this as far as they want. I'm here to just help them do what they want to do the best that they can.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where I'm going with this exactly. I just kind of find that it is very important to be intentional about the way that you talk to your athletes, because you can really, really fuck with someone's head and not even realize that you're doing it.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things that I tell my clients is like, listen, during this entire process, you're the captain of this ship. You dictate where
Yes.
we're going. I'm the
Yes.
fucking co-pilot making sure we don't crash into shit.
I'm your employee.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And it's that level of care that I think separates great coaches from just like the run of the mill coaches, because
Mm-hmm.
how you know how to get them there, like in terms of reps and sets, in terms of periodization, but it's like, how can you filter that knowledge through their eyes and their lens of understanding,
Yep.
right? And their experiences too. Because if all of a
Yep.
sudden you turn into a hard ass and their last coach was a hard ass, and like they have this negative response, they're not going to do as well with the same reps, the same sets, and the same program if they don't feel they're supported, if they feel as if
Exactly.
they're being belittled, if they feel as if
Exactly.
they are not a member of a team. But
Yeah.
then you also have athletes that it's like some masochistic motherfuckers, and it's just like, try to kill me every week.
Yes.
And they respond
Yes.
to that.
Yes. No, so where I learned this was actually in high school with my high school coach. He was one of the best coaches in the world, in my opinion, when it comes to this type of like caring for the athletes communication part. I was in a point in my life where no one had told me that I wasn't special yet. And I hadn't had that, like, I've got my ass kicked on the mat, but I hadn't had that like true mental
Mm-hmm.
humbling yet. And there's another one of my teammates. So my coach was just constantly just like, he would never give me the time of day. You know, when he would want to motivate me to go out on the mat, it would be like, yeah, well, Taylor's probably going to lose this one because statistically this, that, and the other thing. Like, so I don't really believe that you're going to win. And then he'd be putting his arm around this other guy, complimenting him and building him up. And then years later, sit down and have a couple drinks with this guy, and we start talking, like, because we both noticed those differences, like how he would talk to different athletes. And it was like, I was looking back on it, I was like, man, he comforted you and he was an asshole to me. But
Mm-hmm.
if he would have coddled me, I would have never made it. And if he was an asshole to you, you would have never made it, because that's all you were getting at home and that's all I was getting at home. And there
Mm-hmm.
was no. So it was just fucking amazing to me that he saw that, especially at like, this is someone who has 50 kids a year, and he loses some and gets new ones every 4 years. And it's just like that level of coaching where it's just like, over and over and over again. And I had transferred into the school. I was only with him for a year. And so it was like, the fact that you guys are recognizing this stuff and intentionally doing it at such a huge scale is amazing to me.
Mm. Yeah, that's hard, man. As someone who's worked with high school teams and whatnot in the past, it's hard enough to remember their fucking names, let
Yeah.
alone what sort of coaching that they need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I give your coach their credit, because that shit, like, that's and it really, I say this like every episode, it really boils down to how much someone gives a shit about what they're doing. And it's like,
Yep.
he really cared, right? And the
Yep.
fact that he could sit down and have a couple drinks with you a couple years later and then be able to explain that to you, and it's like, fuck. It's like, he
Yeah.
wasn't just being a dick, right?
No, dude. As soon as my career ended with him, he put his arm around me and gave me a cheeseburger, and just
Yeah.
like nothing ever happened. And I was like, what was this about? But it's like, I look back and I'm glad. I wish he was harder on me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it is that variability from person to person is super important. I imagine even within clients that you have, like how you address them, what you say, how you say it can
oh yeah,
vary tremendously from person to person.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, man, we are running at about the hour-ish mark. But man, fuck, you're gonna be on again, 100%.
awesome, man. It was really
Is
great talking to you.
this is
I'm
way
serious. Let's do a
fun.
seminar together. That'd be fucking cool.
Let's do it, man. You let me know your schedule and we can figure something out. But
Okay.
now, where can everybody find you? You have the best fucking Instagram name I've ever seen in my life, by the way.
Taylor Drawl. because my coaching makes you stronger than super draw.
That's so good, man. So where obviously they can find you on Instagram, but do you have any
uh,
products coming out, any programs coming out, anything like that going on?
this is that's kind of the stuff that I'm working on right now. But the YouTube is starting to come along. Instagram is pretty much my really only thing right now. It's something I got to get better at. But yeah, nothing as of right now. Yeah. I'm,
Awesome, man.
I'm bad at the
Oh,
fucking.
please, you're good. You're fucking fantastic at everything you do.
Alright.
But all right, man. Well, thank you very much again. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me on, man. Let's talk again soon, all right?
dude, absolutely. Here we
All right,
go.
man.